I went no contact with my narcissistic mother over a painting. She tried to ruin my life, so I ruined hers. I moved back home when my grandmother's health declined to care for her. My career was gone and I made less money. But it was worth it to care for my nanny. However, I had to move in with my narc mother. I knew it'd be hell since my grandmother only had a lifetime estate. But I had 4 amazing years with the woman who loved and supported me despite my mother's pain inflicted on me. When my grandmother passed, my mom swept in with rules for me to stay. I cared for the home 4 years, paying everything without asking her for a dime. I knew her help came with a price. So I made plans to move out. She tried to prevent it, claiming I owed her money, dangling signing over the house, saying she'd not forgive family who helped me move. I was 39 and she was so controlling. But I packed and left in a U-Haul within a month. After my grandmother died, I did try to maintain a relationship with my mother. I told myself, one more time. But 5 months later, I was done. My aunt made a group chat to keep up on our lives. My mom always criticized my new home. I just reminded her I'd have happily stayed if she hadn't pulled what she did. That made her say I was ungrateful for her not charging me rent while I cared for her mother and worked. Keep in mind, she married well and took the inheritance my grandfather left me. She was just greedy. 5 months in, she texted the group that I'd taken her possessions. When asked, she berated me as unable to tell the truth. I called her about the painting. Again, having to push for actual details was difficult over text, so I called. This is where the painting finally comes into play. She starts launching into me about how I gave an old painting to my father, her ex-husband. I'm like, what the hell are you even talking about? She explains what she believes, that I had, while living with my grandmother or after my grandmother died, given my father an old painting that was in the house. I let her know I wasn't aware any paintings were even missing. She had somehow found out that a painting was back at my father's place. Now, if you have a narcissist in your life, you know how they absolutely adore twisting history to their liking. This painting was in my father's family for generations. I grew up knowing this. My mother simply took it with her in the divorce to hurt my father, as family heirlooms meant a lot to him. So I kept explaining over and over again that I had no idea what she was talking about or how my dad even got the painting. After screeching at me for a while, I finally told her I wasn't entertaining this notion of hers. I would call my father myself to figure out what had happened. She said I'd better get the damn painting back or there'd be hell to pay. So, I called my good old dad. Now my father isn't perfect, but he's been pretty damn good to me, especially after all the stuff my mother put him and me through together. From using me to emotionally blackmail him and intentionally sabotaging our relationship wherever she could. AKA, he knows she's a covert narcissist because he was married to her. So when I call him, he answers with hi, is this about the painting? I laugh and say bingo. He then explains that while my grandmother was alive, she felt bad that my mother had taken the painting from him during the divorce and left it at her home, my grandmother's house. After I moved back in, my father started to visit us. He always loved my nanny, and she adored him as a son-in-law. They reconnected, and he helped us a lot while she was still alive. He'd even visit when I wasn't home sometimes. He said he noticed the painting but never said anything about it to her until she brought it up one day. She told him to please take it back. She knew it was his, and she didn't think my mom even remembered having taken it, as she took almost everything from his house when they divorced. He was very grateful, of course, and took back the family painting. Fast forward to years later when my father was talking to a buddy about their divorces, and he was admitting he finally got something back from her even if it took almost 20 years. They had a laugh, but the friend's now ex-girlfriend was charmed by my mother and told her about the painting being with my father. Boom. She called him and started calling him a thief, saying he knew that painting was her family's and had never been his. He just called her on her BS and said, well, hell, even if it didn't have my family name on it, possession is 9/10s of the law, blah blah. And in no uncertain terms let her know that she would not be getting it back as it was his in the first place. She was livid and, of course, he was amused as she asked how the hell he got it in the first place. He explained my grandmother having given it to him. But for some reason, she fixated on it being my fault. I had to have been the one to give it back to him. I was the one who gave her family's painting to her ex. Tiring story isn't? No, unnecessary and draining. Thinking that was when I realized I was done. So having got the full story from my father, I was texting to my aunt and mother in our group chat, telling them. My mother continued to call me a dirty liar and made nasty comments in the group chat, in front of my aunt. Now I am the most patient and understanding person. So while I really hate how my mother treated me, I would never call her out in front of anyone. I would always argue and debate behind closed doors and alone. As I didn't want to number 1 bring anyone else into the mess that was her abuse and number 2 she was still my mother, and I didn't want to embarrass her in front of anyone. I don't know what it was about this painting that finally broke me, but it was the catalyst. But there were other things that made the painting incident explode. While I had moved, my mother was still intent on having me move back into her home so I could take care of it until I inherited from her one day. Yeah, right. So I tested her on this a few weeks before the painting incident. If I wanted to move back, her conditions were that I would only have access to 1 bedroom. There are 3, but she and her husband are hoarders. BTW his touch, and this was allowing me to have access to the communal areas of the house. Isn't that so kind to allow me one bathroom and access to the kitchen and living room? They're a match made in hell. The reason I'd only had access to one bedroom was that they miraculously put their home on the market and it was going to be sold. They were going to move from a 3-story mansion to a 3-bedroom cabin. So that's the reason she couldn't put the house in my name right away. It'd have to wait until they bought a new house. They would live in the cabin with me while the new home was being built, and their old home sold. It's beyond insane, but this is how her mind works. I then told her no thanks. I'm very happy spending way more money being in a thriving city and having my own home with 3 bedrooms. However, it struck me. My mother likes to lie, a lot. So much so that over the course of years I was doing the hands-off approach. I would record what she'd say and replay it to myself to remind me she wasn't insane. Because, as I'm sure many of you know, gaslighting is a hell of a drug. This house lie was another provable story. There would be evidence if it was on the market. One of my buddies who grew up with me is a real estate agent. He hates my mother because of how my mother treated his mom. So he gladly helped me look at all the listings from as far back as a year ago. Supposedly she had put her house up for sale about a month ago. He couldn't find anything about it. It's listed as not for sale anywhere, even as of today's writing. So, boom, more concrete evidence of her lying. I had recorded the conversation with her and her husband without her knowing it. Don't worry, I live in a one-party state, because again, nothing comes without terms and conditions, and she likes to rewrite history. Back to the future. I had recorded this conversation. I thought it's about time that I do something different. If I'm thinking about going no contact, I might as well go out in a blazing ball of righteous hellfire, right? While she was attempting to humiliate me in front of my aunt again, I spoke to my aunt in a separate message. I'm sorry if you are going to be upset with me, but this has been 41 years in the making, and I'm done. She called me worried, and I told her the truth. Finally, I let someone else hear the lies she told me. And in the group text, I posted the real estate listings and how their home was not listed for sale anywhere. My mother started to go into panic mode and was telling more lies about how it's not up yet because it was so new. I let her know that was a lie too, as it had been quite some time since she said she listed it. My aunt gasped, seeing her floundering for an explanation in the chat. I explained, and she let me know. No matter what, she'd still love me and understood how after years of abuse, I had finally had enough. So as a narcissist usually does, she went on her rampage and started to blacken my name to everyone in our family and in our hometown. Not a big deal, I don't really like my hometown. The few people I keep up with are lifelong pals. They know the private monster my mother can be, versus the public persona most people get. But for years it had been building. I had a lot of proof. However, I was trying to allow her to behave and back off. I had not answered her since the night I posted those listings to my aunt's group chat. But I was getting nasty messages from the flying monkeys about what a terrible daughter I am. I finally texted and let her know. Unless she backed down and stopped this campaign against me, I was going to do something to her for how she's poisoning my name and reputation. I knew from reading about narcissists that this was coming, so I prepared. When she didn't stop, and a preacher I had never spoken to contacted me via Facebook to attempt to shame me into talking to her, I saw red. I did it, I went full scorched earth. I made a huge group chat with all of my contacts in my phone, all our family, some of her friends, some of her ex-friends, her husband's family, his kids, many people in our community, the preacher who decided I was a horrible daughter, and many who believed her lies. Most of these people had turned their backs on me anyway. So I didn't feel too bad when I sent them all the nasty things she had said about them to me in texts, voicemails, and the phone recordings I had. I didn't realize how much I had saved. All just to keep my own sanity with her gaslighting me. And I sent it all. At the end of it, with the story about the house being for sale and the latest lie fest she had concocted shown, my father, who was also in the group chat, took a picture of the painting. He asked in the chat, was this really worth it? Many of these people had also wronged him in the community due to the lies my mother spread about him after their divorce. He and I then left the group chat. Suffice to say, that ruffled many feathers of people. Many of them were upset at how my mother had spoken about them. A lot of them blamed me for being a horrible daughter, and some have apologized to me. I don't care about them. I care about the damage I finally inflicted on the woman who hurt me over and over again with no conscience. I landed a blow to the weakest part of herself. Her public persona, her ego, took that hit, and now she can truly be the victim she's always claimed to be. All of this could have been avoided if she didn't lose her goddamn mind over an old painting that's worth nothing. Nothing but sentimental value, and not even to her. That painting was just a conquest to her. A token of victory over her ex-husband. I went no contact that day. I have also cut off many of the relationships from the people in that chat even if they apologized. It's not that I don't forgive them, I just don't miss them. Maybe I'm a horrible person for doing what I did. But I can't lie and say it didn't feel good finally to show people what she's really like. I spent so much of my life trying to be the good daughter. That when I finally broke, I broke hard. I hope you don't judge me too harshly for my actions, but if I had to do it over again, I'd pick the same every time.